It from Andrew. I secretly left behind a life-saving injection that had once tied him and my father together in my previous life. He abandoned his childhood sweetheart, his so-called white moonlight, and turned around to propose to me. But after we married, he still clung to Sophia, leaving me with a lifetime of grievances, condemned to live like a widow for more than 20 years. It wasn't until I was lying weak and dying on my hospital bed that he finally told me he had never loved me. The only reason he married me was because my father died saving his life, leaving me a helpless orphan with no one to rely on. If he hadn't married me, people would have condemned him for the rest of his life. He was a soldier, and a soldier couldn't afford to have a blemish on his record. With an air of condescension, he spoke his last words to me. "Claire, I gave you 25 years of a good life. I gave you the position of the commander's wife. You should be satisfied. I don't owe you anything. Tomorrow, when I return, I'll go with Sophia to get our marriage license." Then he turned and left the ward without once looking back. When I realized I had been reborn, Andrew was sitting right across from me, his almond-shaped eyes fixed intently on me. It was the third day after my father's death. The funeral had just ended, and Andrew had offered to let me move into his house so it would be easier for him to take care of me. In my past life, drowning in grief over losing my father, I had muddle-headedly agreed to his suggestion. After all, he was the man my father had died saving, and I believed he wasn't a bad person. And indeed, he wasn't exactly bad, but he wasn't a truly good either. Once I moved in, he cut ties with Sophia. It wasn't until after we married that I discovered she still existed in his world. By then, I had already fallen deeply in love with him, obtained the marriage certificate, and gone through the wedding ceremony. There was no room for regret. I could only lie to myself again and again, convincing myself that one day he would see my devotion. But each hope was crushed by disappointment. Even at the very end, I never received an ounce of his pity. Living again, I refused to be as foolish as before. I told him I was already an adult, that I could take care of myself, and that he didn't need to worry. He looked displeased, but I brushed him off with a few casual words until he finally left. After he was gone, I stepped out, went to the neighbor Mr. Johnson's house, and borrowed his bicycle. I rode for over an hour until I finally reached the train station. Our village was remote, and it had only been 4 or 5 years since the reforms began. Transportation was nothing like it would become later. Forget airplanes or high-speed trains. If you wanted to travel far, you could only rely on the old green trains. The ticket seller told me the next train out wouldn't leave until 3 days later, on Saturday. I bought a ticket. In 3 days, I would finally leave this isolated, stifling mountain village, and I would finally be free of that cold, heartless man. But just as I turned around after buying the ticket, I saw Andrew standing at the station entrance. I stopped a short distance away and stared at the man I had devoted my entire life to. At 6 foot tall, with a lean, upright figure, he stood out wherever he was. This was the first time since my rebirth that I had taken a good, careful look at him. At this point in his life, there was still a trace of gentleness in him, not yet the cold hardness he would come to wear later. In my past life, after my father's death, he treated me with such care that all I had to do was reach out, and everything I needed was there. It was nearly impossible not to be moved by someone like that. Even after I discovered Sophia's existence, I never regretted loving him. I stubbornly believed that because we had obtained the marriage certificate and held a wedding, as long as I loved him enough and treated him well enough, he would eventually see me. I naively thought we were a family. Even when he later became commander, constantly away on missions and rarely home, I never uttered a word of complaint. In the end, I had turned myself into a living joke. All of my devotion, all of my love, in his eyes they were nothing more than thorns keeping him from being with Sophia. Maybe my gaze had lingered too long because Andrew quickly noticed me. He strode over in just a few steps, his voice carrying displeasure as he said, "Claire, what are you doing here?" It was only then that I suddenly remembered where I was. This was the train station. But why was he here? I glanced sharply behind him, and sure enough, saw a woman glaring at me with hatred. In that moment, I realized I wasn't supposed to know Sophia yet, so I said nothing. That meant Andrew had come here to see Sophia off, just like in my past life. At this point, even though I had moved into his house, there was still no real intimacy between us. I only regarded him as an older brother figure. Who would have thought that he had already begun scheming against me so early, sending Sophia away right from the start? In my last life, it wasn't until 2 years later, after we had already registered our marriage, that I met Sophia. Back then, Andrew was the one who told me that at 20, I was already considered an old maid in the countryside. And if I didn't get married soon, people would mock me. At the time, I admired him, and with no other man by my side, I agreed to marry him without hesitation. On our wedding day, Sophia came to attend, and only then did I learn she had been his childhood sweetheart. I was devastated, but in the end, I feared the stigma of divorce too much. And besides, he was a soldier. Without his agreement, divorce was impossible. So, even though he never touched me, I still tried my best to care for him, tending to his meals and daily needs, clinging to the hope that one day we would live a normal married life. But in this life, from the moment I came back, I had already given up any thought of marrying him. My heart was set on going to Ocean City. And as for his affairs, I couldn't care less. Maybe because I hadn't responded for too long, Andrew grew impatient. "Claire, I'm talking to you. What are you doing at the train station?" "Forget it. It doesn't matter. When you get back, pack up and move into my house." "I'm not moving in with you, Andrew," I answered firmly. "We're not related, so what would it look like if I stayed at your place? And even if I don't have my parents anymore, I still have other relatives. It's not your place to take care of me." My words left Andrew stunned, his face full of shock and confusion. But soon enough, he regained his usual composure. "How can you say that? Claire, your father gave his life for me. Taking care of you is my responsibility. None of your relatives are reliable enough to look after you." I cut him off with a dismissive tone. "Enough. I get it. Isn't that girl over there waiting for you?" I pointed straight in Sophia's direction. Sure enough, Andrew's face showed a flicker of unease. He muttered nervously, "She's just a high school classmate. She's leaving, so I came to see her off." So hypocritical, eating from one bowl while eyeing another. I didn't care to hear any more of his excuses. With a careless I got back on the bicycle and rode away. In 3 days, I would be gone from here for good. No matter where life took us, we would be nothing but strangers passing on the road. The day was still young, and on the way home, I slowed my pace. As everything quieted down, I noticed how much beauty was around me. Fields of golden canola flowers lined the road, filling the air with their familiar fragrance. Butterflies fluttered in the breeze, and the spring wind, warm against my skin, eased the heaviness in my chest. Even the air seemed to carry the taste of freedom. Leisurely, I pedaled my way back, and by the time I reached home, it was already past 6 o'clock in the evening. Smoke rose from the chimneys of many houses as families prepared dinner. After returning Mr. Johnson's bicycle, I went straight home to cook my own meal. But as soon as I stepped inside, I was met with 3 uninvited guests. It should be said that Andrew's parents were well liked in the village. At first, I had treated them like my own father and mother. But people who seemed so kind and simple on the surface had, step by step, pushed me into a dead end. In my past life, I had even spoken to them about wanting a divorce, hoping they would help persuade Andrew. But what did they say? They told me that as a divorced woman, I would never survive in this society. The gossip in the village was far too cruel. One person's spit alone could drown me. They said Andrew was just young and hot-blooded, and if I treated him well, he would eventually fall in love with me. It was because of their constant persuasion that I endured a marriage that felt like widowhood. Even when I was later diagnosed with breast cancer, they refused to let me have surgery, using the excuse that the family had no money. But by then, Andrew was already a commander. How could he not afford it? They simply wanted me to die in a way that looked righteous and convenient. Reborn into this life, I finally saw through the disgusting facade of this family's supposed virtue. They used me as a stepping stone to polish Andrew's image, earning him a reputation as a man who knew gratitude and cared for his wife, while his parents reaped plenty of benefits in the village. And me? I was the fool. I lived miserably, yet still spoke well of them in front of others, reinforcing their good name. This time, I would never let them get their way. I politely welcomed them into the house, then went to the stove to warm up the leftover food from lunch. That was when Mrs. Smith started in on me. "Oh, Claire, why must you be so unfortunate? Look at me. I only have Andrew, this one stinky boy. If you don't mind, why don't you move in with us? That way I can take care of you. Look at you, eating leftovers. What kind of life is this? It breaks my heart. Don't worry, my dear. I'll treat you like my own daughter and feed you until you're healthy and happy." Mr. Smith and Andrew stood silently by, nodding in agreement the whole time. They had plotted everything down to the smallest detail for Andrew's sake. They had clearly already chosen Sophia as their future daughter-in-law, yet in order to smooth Andrew's career path, they forced her to leave. They knew perfectly well that Andrew was a man of strict principles. If I married him, he would never treat me kindly. Still, they kept me in the dark, luring me step by step into the fire pit. Seeing that I still hadn't spoken, only fidgeting with the firewood in my hands, Mr. Smith turned to Andrew and said, "Boy, you better treat Claire well in the future. The Sue family saved your life. Without her father, you wouldn't even be alive." Mrs. Smith noticed her son's impatience and quickly added, "All right, I'll keep an eye on him, son. Don't be upset by your father's harsh words. We truly owe the Sue family. From now on, you must treat Claire as the most important person in your life. Do you understand?" Listening to their hypocritical words made me sick. The most important person, huh? How ironic. I remembered all too clearly that on my deathbed, when Andrew finally came to the hospital to see me, the first and only time after my illness, I had been overjoyed, eager to speak with him. But what he gave me was a fatal blow. I still remember his words, that I had ruined his happiness, that my father saving him had only been an accident, and that if he had the choice, he would rather have died in that accident than carry such a debt. He said marrying me meant he no longer owed me anything. But it was they who had schemed against me from the very beginning. Why was it that in the end, they gained the good reputation, Andrew's career flourished, and even Sophia lived freely under his protection, while I was the only one used and deceived from start to finish? Just a few days ago, Andrew had accidentally fallen into the pond at the edge of the village. My father happened to be passing by. Without hesitation, he jumped in and dragged Andrew out with all his strength, but in the end, exhausted, he couldn't make it back to shore himself. By the time the villagers rushed over at the sound of the commotion, the only thing they pulled from the water was my father's lifeless body. From that day forward, I was an orphan. From now on, you are my daughter. With Andrew here, no one will ever bully you, Mrs. Smith had promised. That one vow destroyed my entire life. Andrew married me to fulfill that promise, but he never cherished me. He hated me for tearing him away from Sophia, for robbing him of his so-called love. That's why, even though we were married for 25 years in my past life, he never touched me. Nor did he bother to speak to me kindly. He never once considered that it had been his whole family who trapped me from the very beginning. They had tricked me, designing everything so I would only ever come into contact with Andrew, and in the end, they deliberately lured me into marrying him. Now they wanted to ruin my second life as well. "Uncle, Auntie, I appreciate your kindness," I said, "but I won't be moving in with you. I'm already 18, and I can take care of myself. Besides, Andrew will marry a wife someday. I can't get in the way of that. I'm tired now, so I'll eat." I didn't want to hear another word of their nonsense. Since I would be leaving soon anyway, I just wanted to finish a quiet meal without arguing. "Claire," Mrs. Smith stepped forward and grabbed my hand, trying to persuade me. "If you're worried Andrew won't be able to find a wife later, why don't you just marry him? Auntie has always liked a gentle and quiet girl like you, and Andrew likes you, too." I stared coldly at Mrs. Smith prattling on, feeling nothing but disgust. Since they couldn't talk me into moving in, they went straight to forcing a match. Yet she knew perfectly well that the person Andrew truly cared for was Sophia. Just then, the village loudspeaker blared with the voice of the village head. "There's a call from the army for Andrew Smith. It's urgent." At the announcement, Andrew didn't have time to bother with me anymore. He shot up from his seat and said quickly, "Mom, Dad, I need to get back to the unit," then turned and left without looking back. In my past life, he had left at this very same moment. No wonder I had seen Sophia at the train station that day. With the memories I now carried, I knew Andrew must have already worked out a plan with her back then. He schemed for me to marry him so he could gain a spotless reputation and keep me in the village to serve his parents, while he found a way to bring Sophia into the army as a cultural performer. Sophia was beautiful, graceful in song and dance, and even gifted in poetry. Together, they were inseparable in the army, always seen side by side. No matter the situation, at just a word from Sophia, Andrew would appear immediately. In my past life, even when he wasn't home, he often wrote me letters, and I quickly gave my heart to him. But the moment we married, his true face emerged. On our wedding night, he left because Sophia had called, and after that, he claimed he was always on missions, vanishing for months at a time. Each time he returned, he treated me coldly. I wanted to leave, but I had nowhere to go. I swallowed my tears and poured my heart into caring for his family, and in doing so, I wasted my entire life. But heaven had shown mercy, giving me a second chance. This time, I wanted nothing to do with such a man. The next morning, I packed my things for Ocean City. The one advantage of being an orphan was having no ties to hold me back. I stuffed my clothes into a suitcase, then carefully sewed all the family's savings, 410 yuan, into the lining of my undergarment. That money was both the household savings and a compensation for my father's sacrifice. In my past life, after marrying Andrew, I used it to buy him a wristwatch. I never once saw him wear it. I would never be that foolish again. Back then, a city worker's monthly wage was barely 30 yuan, which meant my 400 plus yuan was a small fortune. This time, I would use it to start a new life in Ocean City. By the time I finished packing, it was nearly noon. I lit incense before my parents' memorial tablets and whispered, "Dad, Mom, I'm leaving. I'm going to Ocean City. I've heard the reforms there are going well, and opportunities are everywhere. Your daughter wants to try to live a normal life. Don't worry, I'll take good care of myself. Without Andrew, your daughter will only grow stronger." In the blink of an eye, Saturday arrived. Over the past 2 days, Mr. and Mrs. Smith had come by several times, but I gave them the same answer. I wasn't moving in. To avoid running into them again, I slipped out early that morning. When I boarded the old green train, an overwhelming sense of joy filled my heart. At last, I was leaving. Ocean City was more than 500 kilometers away. The journey required 2 transfers. Whether it was fate or just coincidence, the first transfer point happened to be the very place where Andrew's unit was stationed. During the layover, I had more than 2 hours to wait. I never once considered going to find Andrew. There was no need. He wasn't worth it. I simply went to a small restaurant outside the station and ordered a bowl of noodles. I never expected that even there, I would run into him and Sophia. She wore a light apricot-colored dress that made her stand out in the crowd. So, Andrew had arranged things for her this early. Our eyes met in the air. When he saw me, he looked startled, even a little embarrassed, but he quickly regained his usual calm. "Claire, what are you doing here?" "I'm just passing through," I answered evenly. "I didn't come looking for you." "Passing through? Where are you going?" He pressed on, clearly wanting to know more. Before he could continue, Sophia gently interrupted him. "Andrew, don't worry. Let me talk to Miss Claire. Why don't you go check if our noodles are ready?" Andrew hesitated, then said to me, "Sit down and wait. This is Sophia, my comrade from the unit." With that, he walked off toward the counter. The moment he was gone, Sophia dropped her sweet smile and revealed her true face. Leaning close so only I could hear, she hissed, "You ugly country bumpkin. Why would Andrew ever marry you? Claire, You really have no shame, chasing him all the way to the army. Don't think I don't know. You're only forcing him because your wretched father saved his life. Your whole family is pathetic. Before she could go on, I slapped her hard across the face. The crisp sound cracked through the restaurant, drawing everyone's attention. I had used all my strength, and 5 red fingerprints bloomed clearly on her pale cheek. In my past life, Sophia had said many such things to me in private. I was furious then, too, but I had swallowed my anger, afraid Andrew would think I was a shrew and despise me even more. I had endured again and again, but in this life, Andrew meant less than nothing to me. Why should I hold back? A wrong unavenged would only rot in my heart. Caught off guard, Sophia stumbled to the floor. Shock filled her eyes, but it quickly gave way to performance. She clutched her face and whimpered pitifully. Andrew, it hurts so much. Andrew, who had already noticed the commotion, came rushing over the moment he heard her cry. Claire, are you crazy? Apologize to Sophia right now. Hidden from Andrew's sight, Sophia cast me a mocking triumphant smile. I had no appetite left for the noodles. I stood up, ready to leave. There was no point explaining myself. He would never believe me anyway, so why waste my breath? Seeing me ignore him in front of so many people, Andrew's anger flared. Claire, if you don't apologize, don't expect me to ever acknowledge you again. Andrew had always been excellent, so excellent that he was arrogant about it. Without looking back, I said coldly over my shoulder. Don't worry, Andrew. I promise you'll never have to see me again. He seemed startled, even panicked. What do you mean? Exactly what you think it means, I replied. Andrew, my father may have saved you, but you don't owe me marriage. Don't carry that burden. It was just an accident. If it had been anyone else in that pond, my father would have saved them too. And most importantly, I am not so pitiful as to use his sacrifice to threaten you into marrying me. Hearing those words, Andrew's expression finally showed a trace of guilt. Claire, I didn't mean it like that. But I didn't want to hear any more of Andrew's hypocritical words. Waving him off, I walked straight toward the station. I hadn't expected him to chase after me. Claire, let me take you home. It's not safe for a girl to be alone. Listening to him, anyone who didn't know better might have thought he truly cared for me. I just looked at him in silence, knowing full well Sophia wouldn't allow him to walk me back. Sure enough, with a loud crash, Sophia accidentally knocked over the table. The noodles that had just been served spilled all over her dress. Andrew immediately changed his mind. Of course, his precious white moonlight was far more important than I was. He pulled 100 yuan from his pocket, shoved it into my hand, and said, "Call me when you get home." Then he rushed away without another glance. I strode into the station. Even though I had already decided to cut ties, tears still slipped down my cheeks. Goodbye, Andrew. From this moment on, there will be no place for you in my world. My joys, sorrows, hopes, and regrets will never again have anything to do with you. The train rattled on for 3 days before finally arriving at the city I had dreamed of, Ocean City. I had been here once in my past life, when it was already one of the top cities in the country. But now, with the reforms just beginning, Ocean City was at the dawn of its rapid rise. That was exactly why I had chosen to come here. It was a paradise for entrepreneurs. Walking the streets, I saw fewer tall buildings than there would be in the future, but the bustling crowds gave the city its vibrant energy. Most of them were entrepreneurs chasing their dreams. Someday, countless business leaders would emerge here. Heaven had given me a second chance, and I was determined to seize it. With limited funds and little education, I thought carefully about what kind of business I could start. It had to require little capital, be easy to enter, and still turn a profit. The restaurant business was ideal. At this time, the state encouraged private enterprise, but many people still believed working for the army or entering a state-owned factory was the only secure path, the so-called iron rice bowl. Because of that, there weren't many private restaurants. Looking down the streets, apart from large state-run dining halls, the post office, and the supply cooperatives, you could hardly find a privately owned restaurant at all. State-run restaurants had one fatal weakness: service. Since all the staff were permanent employees with official positions, they had no reason to be polite. Their faces were dark, their tempers foul, and there was none of the customer is king or smiling service that would later become the standard. So even if people had money, many preferred to cook at home rather than go out and suffer poor treatment. That gave me my idea. I would open a private restaurant right next to the industrial district. There were hundreds of factories there employing tens of thousands of workers. Many were from other provinces living alone, and food was a daily problem. Although the factories had canteens, anyone with a little money wanted to eat better. A restaurant there would surely thrive. Besides, I could cook. Back home, I had always been most passionate about experimenting in the kitchen. It didn't take long before I rented a storefront, bought pots, pans, utensils, and ingredients from the supply cooperative, and set up tables and chairs. Soon, Claire's kitchen officially opened. My dishes were delicious, reasonably priced, and visibly clean and hygienic. From day one, the place was packed. Later, I hired 3 waitresses. The 4 of us worked hard, each handling our own tasks. It was exhausting, but when I tallied the accounts at the end of the first month, even after wages and food costs, I had cleared a net profit of 3,000 yuan. This was the 1980s. 3,000 yuan was nearly the equivalent of a working family's income for 2 whole years. My hands trembled as I counted the money. Claire, you did it. 6 months later, my little restaurant had already expanded into 3 storefronts. The number of waitresses had grown to 8. In just half a year, I had already become a well-known 10,000 yuan household. With money in my hands, I no longer felt afraid. Even if I were to fall ill, I wouldn't have to sit and wait for death just because I couldn't afford medical bills. One day, while I was busy at the restaurant, I suddenly heard someone call out at the door, "Claire." I looked up and was surprised to see Uncle Chen from the village. I quickly invited him in and added a few more dishes to the table for him. As he ate, he told me about the things that had happened back home. He said that after I left, Mr. and Mrs. Smith went to my house and found it empty. Fearing something had happened to me, they went straight to the village head. The whole village searched for me for more than a month, but there wasn't a trace. In the end, they had no choice but to give up. Many people believed I had died. According to Andrew, I had gone to find him at the army base and then returned to the village. Since I never actually returned, the assumption was that something must have happened to me on the way back. That was why Uncle Chen had been so shocked when he suddenly saw me alive and well in Ocean City. Uncle Chen urged me to go back, but I refused. "Uncle Chen, I'm doing very well here. Please just tell everyone back home not to worry about me. Let them know I'm fine." In the days that followed, I continued running the restaurant during the day and returned to my rented apartment at night. Then, one evening, as I came home, I noticed a man standing at the door in military uniform. It was Andrew. When he saw me stop in my tracks, he looked at me with a complicated expression. "Claire, you have no idea how hard it's been to find you. Ever since Uncle Chen's visit, I knew the news of me being alive couldn't be hidden for long. But I never expected Andrew would personally come searching." His handsome face was drawn with exhaustion as he spoke, each word heavy. "Claire, come back with me. Your family's waiting for you. You don't know how worried I've been these past 6 months. Thank God you're safe. If something had happened to you, I'd never forgive myself." Looking at him, I felt no joy, only annoyance. "Andrew, I told you already. I will never appear in your life again. Leave. I'm not going back." His face darkened with anger and humiliation. "Claire, I came all the way here to bring you back. What more do you want? You're just jealous of Sophia, aren't you? Let me tell you, nothing improper has ever happened between us. And if you don't believe me, then let's go back, get the marriage certificate, and hold the wedding. I know you care about me, and I care about you, too. Let's just get married, all right?" I shook my head firmly. "Andrew, when did I ever say I had feelings for you? And I'm not refusing to go back because I'm jealous. I simply don't want to return to that small mountain village." Hearing the certainty in my voice, he finally seemed to accept that I truly didn't want to marry him. His face was a mix of shock and confusion, but mostly relief. Of course, he would be happy. Now he could finally marry Sophia, his true love. Still, why did I catch a trace of unwillingness in his eyes? "Claire, do you really mean it? You're truly not going to marry me? But you once said you wanted to be with me forever." "It's true, every word." Andrew left, and my life returned to normal. From then on, the only times I went back were once a year to pay respects at my parents' graves. I never returned otherwise. Later, I heard that Andrew did marry Sophia, but their marriage wasn't smooth. Sophia had somehow learned that I was making good money in business, and she pestered Andrew relentlessly, demanding money to start her own venture. Andrew refused, insisting he wasn't cut out for business. Unexpectedly, while no one was home, Sophia secretly took all of Mr. and Mrs. Smith's savings, along with Andrew's wages, and handed it over to others to invest. In the end, of course, all the money was lost. Andrew wanted a divorce, but he discovered that Sophia was pregnant. Later, I heard he volunteered to transfer to the border defense, leaving Sophia behind. She eventually became just like I had been in my past life, alone in an empty house. When I heard the news, I only smiled faintly. After all these years, I had never married again. It took living through 2 lifetimes for me to finally understand one truth. Lean on the mountains, and they'll crumble. Lean on the waters, and they'll flow away. The only person I could ever truly rely on